Welcome back, everyone in the room, and welcome to our audience in the live stream. I know for you in the room, this was maybe a very short break for a very intense film, so I'm very thankful that you're still with us and that you are also here to further discuss what we just saw. And to everyone in the live stream, I'm sorry we couldn't broadcast the film that we just saw, but you can watch it, 9-month contract from Ketevan Vashagashvili. I'm sure there's ways to see that film also for people who haven't been here tonight. So I hope you in the room here had some time during the break to let the impressions of the film sink in. And while Ketevan, in her amazing film, allows us to dive deep into the realities of surrogacy of one individual case, we now want to zoom out and we want to take a look at the global picture and at the realities of the surrogacy market and at the different actors and structures that shape surrogacy today and that might also shape surrogacy in the future. I would like to introduce Professor Amrita Pande next to me. Thank you so much for making all the way from South Africa. She arrived yesterday night, so it's really a pleasure to have you here. Professor Amrita Pande is a professor of sociology and fellow at University of Capetown, and her research focuses on transnational reproduction and reprogenetic justice. And she has conducted incredible ethnographic research around, among others, the topic of surrogacy. We have started to work with Amrita 2 years ago when the idea of a global report mapping the economic realities of the surrogacy industry came about, and we are so excited to launch today the result of this collaboration, which is this report that I think some of you might already have gotten a copy because I don't see any more. But those of you who didn't and those of you online, you can download it also from our website. I think this report provides utterly needed qualitative data to understand how this industry works and how it might shape the future of reproductive markets and also of the social relations around families and making babies. I also want to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues Naida Kuchukalic and Jana Saraj-Mekic, who are in the live stream, I think. We are colleagues at the Global Unit for Feminism and Gender Democracy, which I direct. And without Naida and Jana, this also would not be possible. Now I would like to welcome you, Amrita, you're already on stage on my paper. You're still coming up the stage, but you're already here, to share a keynote with us. I know it's not an easy task after watching this film, but I'm sure you can give us a little bit of an insight on how to contextualize what we just saw in the grand scheme of the market where surrogacy is placed. And after this short intervention, we will also have another panelist and Ketevan on stage, so you can please then think about your questions already and then pose them later. So I hand over to you. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you for inviting me here across continents and countries to do this very difficult job now. So what I had planned, I'll need to tweak it a bit because, yes, I do want you to zoom out from the very powerful documentary that we watched just now, but I also don't want you to zoom out too much. Because I think what I'm going to talk about, the only way we can harness this energy that we have in the room to actually have a dialogue is to keep that energy that you have right now and then connect it to, so then what do we do as people who are probably never going to be surrogates? Perhaps we won't be hiring the services of surrogates either, but yet we have a huge responsibility as people who have now been made aware of what's happening, not just in Georgia, but in many, many, many parts of the global south. So I will try and do my best to harness these two different kind of energies connected, the intimate and the really powerful energy that you have been able to create, Ketevan, through your documentary and following the journey of the relationship between the mother and her daughters, Jana and Elena. you all have my sympathy because I have worked with surrogates, gestational mothers, I like to call them, across many different contexts now, whether in India, Cambodia, Ghana, Nepal, Thailand, South Africa. Some of the stories have been dangerously similar to the one that you just saw with Jana. Some others have been very different from what you just saw. But yet, I think doesn't matter what the ultimate outcome of the surrogacy process is. We need to pay attention to what the desires of the people like Jana are. Why do they get involved in this? What are the structural reasons for it that they get involved? What are the structural reasons that intended parents get involved in this? And now we're going to throw the ball at you and say, so what is it that you and I can do to think about ways to make it better? Okay. And as we said, we are going to have time to really give voice to the emotions that you're feeling right now. But I want to harness that and speak about policies. Okay, so the presentation that I wanted to make and the report that we've come together with, can I just move these mics a bit? It's okay. Yeah. Draws on 17 years of ethnographic research that I've done in various parts of the world, but all of them are in what is called the Global South. So I have lived with surrogates in hostels in India. So the practice of surrogacy in India when it was booming was very often to keep surrogates in dormitories, surrogacy dormitories. Not the kind of life that you saw Jana have. Women in India and Ghana and in Nepal and some parts of Cambodia were often expected to live in dormitories during the entire length of their pregnancy. This, of course, adds a different kind of complexity to this labor market, and we can talk about that later in the Q&A. But the report is not just about gestational surrogacy and my work and interviews and ethnographies with them, but it's as much about connecting it to who else are involved in making and sustaining this industry. The professionals involved, who I call care brokers in the report, who are the care brokers who allow this industry to sustain and boom. And of course, the intended parents. But before I get into that, before I actually get into the core argument of the report, I want to make sure that we understand that this is a huge industry that we are talking about. It's not just in one country, it's not just in two countries, it's not just about connecting the desire of a desperate woman who wants a genetically related baby, but she cannot have it for a variety of perhaps medical reasons or social reasons, and connecting that to the intimate desires of a woman who's from a vulnerable economic situation and who dreams of making some money. It's actually way beyond those intimacies and way beyond those reproductive narratives. And this is something that we really need to keep in mind. It is a global industry. It has parallels to many other global factories that you and I, who are aware feminists, are quite aware of how they have unfolded across the world. But here, of course, the biggest difference is that what the women are producing in these global factories are not shirts for cheap to be sold in H&M, but a priceless baby. I have been studying this market for nearly 20 years now. That makes me feel very old, but yes, I have been studying this for 20 years. It started as my PhD project. It became my first book, Wombs in Labor, which was about surrogacy in one one little clinic in Western India and the surrogacy hostel connected with it. But since then, I've realized that although I'm a feminist ethnographer at heart, I need to immerse myself in more than one field to be able to understand the nuts and bolts of the industry. I'm not going to assume a lot of the nuts and bolts you've understood by watching the movie, but I'm not going to assume that you've understood everything. So I'm going to take 30 seconds to just give you the science of it. So what's happening here that you saw in the movie and that has been that's been unfolding in the global fertility industry is that the making of the baby is no longer about one woman, one man, and sexual intercourse. That has been completely disrupted by this technology. Every aspect of the baby-making process has a market involved now, and each aspect of it has actually been outsourced to various parts of the world. Again, we can talk more when we see the global map. The reason why it has moved to countries in the global south, that's really important to keep in mind. Part of it is cost considerations. Not everyone can go and make their baby in California. California is still the biggest hub for surrogacy, but not everyone can afford California. So people have been trying to find cheaper options, and these cheaper options are where? In Asia, in Africa, and in countries which are lower down in the political economic scene in Europe, the example of which you just saw. So patients or intended parents, as we like to call them in the global fertility world, now travel across the world to have a genetically related baby or a baby tailor-made to their own preference. And again, we can talk about what that means to get a baby tailor-made. And as the task of producing a baby technologically can be divided into neat segments, and as with globalization, we can outsource the different parts of the segments to different parts of the world. What's happening is, you saw one aspect of it. What happens in the making of the baby through technology? There's an egg involved. Almost the entire surrogacy market that we are going to be talking about today is of gestational surrogacy. Does that make sense to this audience here? So essentially, what's happening is that the surrogate mother, the gestational mother, has no genetic connection with the baby. There is the egg that is extracted out of either the intended mother or an egg provider. There's the sperm that is very often extracted from the intended father. It's put together, made into an embryo inserted into the womb of a surrogate mother. So that is why this strange phrasing, surrogate mother, substitute mother, as if there's anything like a substitute mother. You saw what a surrogate mother goes through. How dare we call her a substitute mother? But she is literally the oven for the bun, right? Because she does not have any genetic connections with the baby. So when I started my journey into this world of surrogacy, it started in India, and at that point, this was in 2005, at that point, it was very new in the global south. The entire debate was Euro-American because surrogacy existed only in the Euro-American context. But in the past 2 decades that I've been studying this industry, this has changed immensely. Okay, and with that story, and we'll have enough time to talk much more about the history and the presence of this huge multi-billion-dollar industry, let me launch into the main findings of the report. So what I argue in the report is that the global surrogacy industry cannot be analyzed as primarily a response to unmet reproductive need. It's actually fundamentally supply-driven. It's shaped by global inequalities, legal loopholes, and the strategic investment of what I call care brokers in this report. So these care brokers are essentially intermediaries who manage and ensure the sustenance of this industry. And you can get far more details in the report, which you can download and read. I won't want to waste too much time talking about the narratives of the care brokers, but they play a very important role in it. So even in Germany, if you pick up any kind of popular media, you will start off reading about surrogacy as a response to what? Medical infertility, social infertility, so essentially for LGBTQ or couples or single parents, expanding family norms, and this kind of framing, which is talking basically about the demand for surrogacy, this framing is not incorrect, but it's not adequate for analyzing this booming surrogacy industry. And the reason why I say that is in the various contexts that I've studied in the past many years, and that I flesh out in the report, I've observed that the market for surrogacy moves to countries where surrogates can be made available, and a legal vacuum can be found, not where demand increases. And this analytical lens is really important for Germany to keep in mind as it contemplates, hopefully it's contemplating still, reforms to its reproductive laws. So as we know that in Germany, at the moment, the law currently prohibits surrogacy entirely, and in fact, it criminalizes facilitation. Yet, we also know this, that German residents continue to pursue surrogacy abroad every year. So in the report, I talk about what this shows to us, if that's not obvious already, that restrictions rarely prevent participation in this industry. Instead, what it does, it outsources the whole industry to jurisdictions that are weaker, so they are lower down in the political economy. I want to be a little quick because I want to keep more time for the dialogue and your questions. What I observed is that, and what I describe in the report, is that there are three phases. It's really important to think about the history of the surrogacy in a particular way so that we can predict the future of the market, and that's the role where we will play. What is the future of this market? So the first phase is the northern hubs. So what I call the one-stop surrogacy happening in the northern hubs, mostly in the United States and Europe. United States, as I said, still remains the biggest reproductive hub. But what I want to focus on is phase 2 and 3, which is since 2005, what's been happening to the industry. So between 2005 and 15, countries like India, Thailand, Nepal, Czech Republic, Ukraine, became major destinations for surrogacy, and that happened very quickly and in really unexpected ways. Why did intended parents suddenly start flying down to these global south countries? Partly because of cost considerations, but also because these countries could offer one-stop surrogacy and package deals. So you could, as an intended parent from Germany, fly down to India, where if you wanted a racial match with an egg donor and you identified as white, it doesn't matter that there were no white people in India, but they would fly down a white egg donor from South Africa, from Georgia, from Czech Republic, and make sure you got the kind of egg donor you wanted. They'll make sure that the embryo is made in that clinic. They'll make sure that it's inserted into a gestational mother, and they'll also make sure that the gestational mother is surveilled and kept in a hostel for the 9 months of their parents, 9 months of pregnancy. In fact, they'll also make sure that your child's name in the birth certificate comes under the names of the intended parents as the real parents, and the surrogate mother's name does not appear on the birth certificate. And they'll also make sure, as part of the package deal, that you'll get a passport for the baby so that you can bring the baby back home to Germany. In fact, they'll also tell you that while you're doing all this, why don't you take a trip down to the Taj Mahal? So while your embryo is growing in a petri dish, you can go and take a trip to Taj Mahal. So these were the kind of one-stop surrogacy package deals that were being offered by countries like India. But that was very short-lived, that phase. Okay, maybe not that short-lived because it lasted from 2005 to 2015. But in the longer scheme of things, the hubs where these kind of one-stop surrogacy packages could be offered kept changing. And why they kept changing, we need to understand through what I call the domino effects of restrictive laws in the report. So what happened was that as soon as surrogacy starts booming in a country, for instance, in India, there's going to be surrogacy scandals. Because this is a very complicated story, as you've understood by watching the documentary. There are people crossing borders. There are people sometimes with very dangerous intentions who are crossing borders. Sometimes there are people who are just desperate to have a baby who are also crossing borders, but they're moving into a jurisdiction that they're not familiar with. They don't know what's going to happen. There are many uncertainties in any IVF. There are many uncertainties in surrogacy and egg donation. So very often there are what are called surrogacy scandals that erupt in any country which allows international clients to fly into the country to hire a woman to get pregnant for them for money. And that happened in every part of the world between 2005 and 2015. And states started realizing, countries started realizing that the easiest thing to do is to say, I'm going to ban surrogacy completely, either ban commercial surrogacy completely or ban the international aspect of it. So what happened was, and that you can't see that map really well here, it's too small for you, but you should be able to zoom into that very well into our online and as well as the report that you have in hand. So what happened was that India banned foreign commercial surrogacy in 2015 after a lot of surrogacy scandals. What happened? Did that mean that people stopped traveling across the world because India has banned surrogacy? No, of course not. Agencies moved very quickly to Nepal. Why did Nepal come up? Because Nepal was very close to India. Much like in global factories, you can move infrastructure very quickly to a neighboring country. The entire infrastructure, in fact, many surrogates from India who were already pregnant were also moved to Nepal. I was at that moment studying surrogacy in India. I had to move to Nepal to be with many pregnant Indian surrogates who were now housed in hostels in Kathmandu. But very quickly, another scandal erupted in Nepal because of the earthquake, and which exposed the booming surrogacy business there. Till then, the international public did not have any idea that surrogacy was happening in Nepal. But the earthquake hit. Many Israeli parents were very nervous that what will happen to my newborn baby sitting in Kathmandu? What will happen to my surrogate mother who's pregnant with my child? Israel sent planes to rescue the babies, and this became a huge scandal, exposed Nepal's hub, and Nepal's government was forced to ban the market. It moved to Thailand. Thailand banned it to foreigners after another chain of scandals. From Thailand, it moved to Cambodia. I followed it throughout. I worked with surrogates in Cambodia, in Phnom Penh. It had a little bit of a different feel in Phnom Penh. We can talk about it, or you can read about it in the report. Cambodia not just banned it, it criminalized it. It put some pregnant surrogate mothers in prison, and they were shackled to prison beds in Phnom Penh. I almost got criminalized as well. So anything to do with the surrogacy industry was overnight criminalized in Phnom Penh. It moved to Laos, and then from there, of course, you can guess where it's moved to now. What's down in the food chain? Africa. So now it's moved to different countries in Africa. So basically, what we need to keep in mind that restrictive bans, where we are only thinking about our own country, is just not adequate or even appropriate for something that requires international dialogue and international guidelines. The third phase is the one that I want you to pay attention to when you look at the report, which is the fragmented nubs. And the reason why these fragmented nubs have come up is exactly the story for the future. I'm not going to spend more time talking about the role of care brokers, except to say that it's really important to pay attention to the people who are making profits out of this industry. These people, there's no conspiracy theory here. These are not evil people. They are required for a couple of reasons. One is that there is intricate work required in making a market and an industry that is ethically so sticky, scientifically so uncertain. How do we make it sound normal? How do we make every intended parent think that it's just okay to put in so much money, so much energy, put other women's lives at stake to get a genetically related baby? Again, I'm not demonizing intended parents. What I'm saying is that there is curation that happens to make this industry seem natural, normal, and desirable. And the care brokers play a very important role in it. In the report, you'll find many more details about the couple of really big and some medium-level care brokers that we were able to interview and spend some time understanding their strategies. How do they make sure that they can not only sustain the industry, but also profit from it? That's not an easy task, because remember that there are huge crises that hit this industry, sometimes in the form of legal bans, sometimes in the form of war. For instance, Ukraine had a huge surrogacy industry going there, and then war hit. What happened to the surrogates there? What happened to the industry there? It's actually still continuing underground. Women also gave birth in shelters during the war. It also moved to Georgia, and that's exactly what you saw now. Now, Georgia has become so huge that now these care brokers are realizing that it's not that easy to invest in Georgia, because there's way too much demand and not that many women who can or who want to become surrogates. So now it's moving to Albania, it's moving to various parts of the world. These care brokers make a lot of money from it, but they also are the ones who hold the hands of the intended parents. I want you, when we start dialoguing, to think about who is holding the hands of the surrogate mothers. I want you to think about whether it makes any sense to think about national laws during a time where all of us are very much aware of the fact that globalization means that people and technologies will cross borders, and the kind of laws that we make in one country will have repercussions for not just countries across the border, but across the world. It will have repercussions for not just our citizens, but for the most vulnerable across the world. So what is our duty as global citizens, and I presume as feminists sitting in this room? These are some of the things that I want you to keep in mind. What can Germany do if it's contemplating laws, changes in the laws, which I hope it is? What is it that we can think about pragmatically? I'm just going to throw some provocations at you. International guidelines. This is a discussion that I've had with The Hague about 15 years ago. I was invited to The Hague so that we could come up with a guideline that would be parallel to the one that exists about international adoption. Where do you think that has gone? Nowhere in the past 15 years, because there can be no consensus about surrogacy, while there can be consensus about adoption. So I think there is still a real importance in all of us thinking about an international dialogue, but also keep the pragmatics of this industry in mind, that it's not going to get any simpler for feminists. There will be no consensus among feminists about surrogacy, much like there is no consensus among feminists about sex work. We'll just have to deal with that. There will be some really fruitful things that will come out from dialogues beyond silos. We can't think about surrogacy as only a conversation with people who are scientists and those policymakers who talk about just surrogacy. We need to think about adoption. We need to think about egg provision. We need to think about sex work. We need to think about reproductive work. All these things need to be thrown at you when you start asking us questions and thinking about the really intimate and beautiful and powerful documentary that we just watched. And then keep zooming in and zooming out and thinking, so what is it our role sitting here in, where are we? In Berlin, on a Friday night, spending so much time thinking about something that the world thinks is niche and specialized, but actually is not. So let's move into the dialogue.
Thank you so much, dear Amrita. This was very insightful. I hope also for you. I mean, I already know the report quite well, but still, every time you talk, I think you explore a new part. Please sit. There's going to be a little change of scenery here. Don't mind us. So I think what you really, I mean, this report is full of insights, I think, but something that I think is so important for a feminist discussion on this topic is that what you said in the beginning, that it is about a supply-driven industry and not only a demand-driven industry. And why is that an important insight, I think, is because I don't know about you, but there's barely political debate on surrogacy in Germany, and if there is some media coverage or some debate about it, it's usually a very moralizing debate. So it is about the gestational mothers and portraying them maybe as victims of being exploited, or about the intended parents that are suffering. And what is also a reality is that we live in a capitalist global economy, and of course this is a commodified issue, and we have to also see the realities of the market and then make up our minds what our political position is. And I think, as you said, there is no consensus amongst feminists, and I mean the Heinrich-Böll Foundation and the Gunda Werner Institute, we are also here to provide platforms to come to a position, even if it's a controversy, we want to have it. So this is why I'm so happy you are here. But also, I'm inviting now on stage Capetown, the director of the film that we just saw, and also Irina Herb. Please join us on stage as well. So Capetown, you were already introduced. Thanks again so much for your amazing film. And Irina Herb. Irina is a sociologist exploring feminist perspectives on pregnancy, and will complete our panel tonight, adding insights from her research project at University of Jena, Who Owns the Means of Reproduction and Commodification, the Political Economy of Assisted Reproductive Technologies. I know it's late, and this is a lot, but we have to start the conversation at some point, so we're going to do that now. I promise I will only have actually one question to you, one question to you. You are here to answer questions from the audience. I will immediately then hand over to you. Amina has a microphone, so you can ask a question. We're going to keep this interesting and spicy. So I think maybe I want to turn to you because, of course, oh, yes, sorry. Yeah, I didn't think about that logistic, right. In your film, I mean, what I actually want to hear, of course, I have so many questions about this film, but I'm sure I already heard in the break, people have questions, so I'm not going to ask the obvious questions. What I would like to know from you is what we just heard from Amrita's keynote, where we zoomed out and we saw the dynamic of this market. What part of this resonates with your research, which was a different research? It wasn't academic in this way purely, but it was actually very personal. But do you see any reflections of what Amrita shared with us in the Georgia case?
Yes, of course I see. I was making this film for 9 years. I started in 2016. The situation in Georgia changed a lot. So at the beginning it was like very silent business. Many people did not know that it was happening, and then it was growing slowly. But after the full-scale invasion in Ukraine, so I saw that it's totally boomed because, as I understood, many agencies relocated to Georgia. And recently I noticed that approximately 1 year ago, I found out that the demand was so big that women were not enough, and those agencies were searching for women, and there were not any. And then I saw that they started to bring women from different countries, so from Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Ethiopia, Kenya, so Russia, Thailand. So yeah, of course, for me, it resonates with each other that the process was like Georgia is booming at the moment, and which I understood it may be temporary. And for example, 2 years ago there was the talk from the government. They had initiative to ban. So it's the same maybe because of the scandals. There were some scandals with the women found from Thailand, 100 women who were taking out the egg cells, etc. But then they stopped. But when the agencies, I realized that the agencies were already relocated to Armenia. So some of them were already trying to do it. So I think this is the scheme, how it works.
Thank you so much, Capetown. Now, Irina, getting you on board as well. So, as I already said, you work on the political economy of infertility and its treatments. So there are technological fixes that we have been talking about today. But I want to ask you, after seeing the film and listening to Amrita's keynote, how does this resonate with your own research? And maybe if you can, or actually just share what mostly sparks now and what you think maybe especially from this political economy perspective is missing still in the conversation.
Yeah, thanks. I was quite inspired by the finding or your argument that what's going on is also supply-driven, right? And I want to sort of like flip the coin a bit and talk about how also the demand is political. But before I do that, since I will sort of talk about the German context a bit more, and I'm not sure who's in the room exactly, I would just say a few things about the German context so we're all on the same page. So, as we've already heard, in Germany both egg donation and surrogacy are illegal. And this is regulated in the so-called Embryonenschutzgesetz, which translates to protection of the embryo, basically, which is from the 1990s. And sort of recently, the neoliberal party, FDP, especially, has been pushing to legalize both commercial egg donation and altruistic surrogacy. And since I am sort of quite interested in the political economy of fertility and the technologies behind it, it's sort of an interesting side note that one of the biggest donors to the FDP is also affiliated with the industry of reproductive technologies in Germany. So there are quite strong ties and financial interests in this. So against this backdrop and against this evolving conversation, the last government had commissioned a report. And the commission had suggested to legalize egg donation under quite strict conditions and to keep surrogacy illegal. And I'm sure that some of the people here in the room actually know more about the commission than I do, so I'm happy to pass on questions later onwards. But for now, it's both illegal, which also means that we do not have any official numbers on how many people in Germany travel abroad to do surrogacy. But I have been sort of digging the internet, and at least experts are estimating that it is about 50 to 100 children in Germany born via surrogacy abroad each year, which sort of means that this film actually really concerns us here in Germany. And yeah, I was asked to keep it short, so I want to offer 3 thoughts. I usually preach that we must concern ourselves more with like who owns these means of reproduction and who profits from them. But I think, Amrita, you've already sort of, shed light on the supply side. So I want to sort of focus a little bit on the demand side, which I can't do justice to in my remaining 3 minutes. But I do want to just sort of bring that into the conversation as well. And this is actually because I do want to push us to take involuntary childlessness quite seriously and to have compassion with those who cannot fulfill their wish for a child. And indeed, more and more people in industrialized nations like Germany are involuntarily childless. So this means they would like to have children or more children than they can. And I want to sort of challenge us to acknowledge that involuntary childlessness, quite a chunky word, doesn't appear out of thin air. But rather it's a society within the capitalist system that we live in this situation has been, at least to a certain degree, fabricated. So biological infertility, for example, has been scientifically demonstrated to be on the rise, and pesticides, microplastics, and even noise pollution have been shown to increase biological infertility. And it's quite important to take into account that this doesn't affect everyone the same. Like toxic waste is rarely found in good neighborhoods. So to support people with their wish for a child, it's really important that we fight for healthy environments and we fight for environmental justice. And similarly, when we look at surveys in Germany, one of the #1 reasons why people do not have the children they would like to have, and that's 30% in a certain age bracket at the moment and rapidly rising. So one of the reasons is economic reasons. So people state that they simply can't afford having the children and raising them safely that they would like to have. And in this context, research shows that the housing crisis is directly linked to fertility rates. And here again, injustices are reproduced because when housing prices rise, renters have fewer children and those owning homes have more children because they obviously profit. So this is not the case everywhere the same. Like this exact study that I'm citing is from the Netherlands, but we see similar trends and patterns emerging in different areas. And the role of the welfare state in supporting families, I think I don't have to mention, I think that's pretty clear. So again, here, if we want to support people in their wish for children, we must fight to collectively take responsibility for children. And this brings me to a second point. So if we live in societies where this is not the case, where we do not have adequate housing, adequate healthy environments, adequate childcare, et cetera, reproductive technologies risk to become a tech fix for problems that are at least partially social or political. And crucially, and I think this is really important in the context of surrogacy, these tech fixes are only available to those who can afford it. And especially when we look at commercial surrogacy, it's a phenomenon confined to the middle and upper classes. I know I'm running out of time. Should I stop? No, okay. I do want to conclude with a final and third point, and that's really important to me. Reproductive technologies are not at all bad in themselves. And similarly, creating families beyond biological ties can be an emancipatory endeavor. And yet, in the current capitalist system that we live in, we do see that they subsume pregnancy under uneven logics of value creation. And in this context, it is no coincidence that surrogacy relationships echo colonial patterns of extraction. And I want to mention that each year in Berlin, we have a fair that brings together brokers, like Amrita is researching. And just a few minutes away from where we're sitting right now, they are advertising for egg donation, surrogacy arrangements. And last year, they were advertising for surrogacy in Ghana, which is, at least parts of Ghana, are a former colony of Germany. And they are advertising not only surrogacy in Ghana, but also sex selection and the screening for genetic conditions. And in this case, Black motherhood is entirely erased. Even the birthing certificate, and they actively advertise this, does not have to show the name of the birther as a birther. And here I sort of just want to put one thought in that I want to challenge, and I think maybe we might have slight disagreements here, which is interesting, the idea that if we keep surrogacy banned in Germany, this means that it's just simply outsourced to other places. Because we do see, and you've mentioned this as well, right, that intended parents in the global north often find surrogacy in their own country prohibitively expensive. So they do follow the cheap prices in the global south. So at least when we look at egg donation, actually, for example, in Spain, most internationals doing egg donation in Spain come from countries where it is legal, but it's cheaper in Spain, and that's why they go in Spain, and also regulatory preferences that they prefer. So I want to end by returning to my usual preaching, that we need to know who actually owns reproductive technologies and makes money with them. And the answer is that mostly currently they're not in our hands. And rather they are owned and put to profit by international brokers, as Amrita has mentioned, massive healthcare conglomerates, and increasingly super rich tech bros like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, who are pursuing a pro-natalist, anti-abortion campaign. And so if we bet on technological rather than on social solutions to find involuntary childlessness or a combination of it, we do risk risk rendering ourselves at the mercy of powers like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel. And I'm not saying this to be dramatic, but this is really research we need to be doing. We need to be looking into who owns this and what's going on in this sphere. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think this deserves an applause. Thank you so much for even, spanning this a bit out more. I mean, I think we've had now so many zooming in, zooming outs, and also looking at this in a way of what about the social problems behind it, or the social realities that create these conditions that we have been talking about today. Without further ado, let's just open the floor for questions. Maybe Capetown, if you would give one microphone to Amina. We will collect a few because we don't have too much time, and then we have one round where questions can be answered. I take some notes so to be sure that they are answered. It can also be comments, of course. I know we have some experts in the room also.
No comment. 2 questions. The first one is for Amrita and Capetown. Thank you so much for the movie, for the documentary. It's about terminology. Amrita, you said you refer to the persons offering surrogate services as surrogate mothers. And Capetown, as we saw in the documentary, Sana talked about, a mother should never give away her child into an orphanage. And maybe, of course, there probably won't be one answer to what's the right terminology. Just from your findings in the field, I would be interested in hearing your thoughts on this. And the second question is on the domino effect of bans. I was wondering, and maybe this adds to Irina, your observation, if there might be also a domino effect of legalization of egg donation and surrogacy in the meanings or in the sense of people feeling empowered to use reproductive technologies if even abroad, if it's legal in their own country, because then and there might be even a stop to the public discussion, the public debate about it, as we learned from Laura Perla and her research on egg donation in Spain, that there's no more national debate once there is a legalization in the country. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Teresa. Are there more questions?
Thank you very much. It was really interesting. I was just, maybe have a question, comment, kind of, because I found it very insightful and very interesting how you listed the social aspects of infertility. And Irina, sorry. And I was just thinking about another aspect maybe, and which I think is very fundamental for the kind of understanding of the social structuring of infertility. And I would be interested to hear what you think about it, because I think the family, like as the bourgeois family, as the only socially sanctioned option of procreation, actually, that I don't know, but I would think the concept also has inherent this kind of biogenetic understanding of relation and children only as real children, as biogenetically related children, and so on. I mean, don't we have to think about like the family as this huge institution that's basically the foundation of this demand side, basically?
Thank you. I also, just because maybe now the bar is quite high to ask very almost academic questions, which are very welcome, but also feel free to ask questions or comments about the film, that something that it can also be emotional. I just want to, Susanne.
Sorry,
No,
I have
from you, I know.
I have another question on Amrita, for Amrita. The debate about legalization, what effect this has or not, and bans. I find it very interesting. Also, your argument, but that's not my point. I would like really to know which would be the good guidelines parallel to adoption. Just to what are your suggestions, and we could even fight for it. Beyond the question if it has to be legalized or not, legal or not in our own countries. And the other question is more like a question to the fragmented hubs, you said. Does it has also to do with the change of technologies that, for example, it's more possible now to freeze eggs and to transport them and to have egg banks and so on? Has this to do with the possibility of more fragmented hubs, not only like the legal situation, as you said?
One more, I would say, and then we close the floor.
I'll take up the invitation to ask something about the film. It's maybe a very obvious question, but I'd really be interested to know how you negotiated access, because particularly with such a practice that is so stigmatized and takes place, shrouded in so much secrecy, I found the access that you had was quite phenomenal, also in the clinics and in all these spaces that are not usually welcoming. So I'd be very curious to hear more about that.
Thank you so much. So I would suggest that we do one last round where you can say whatever you want and answer the questions. And I would start with you with this question, and then Amrita, and then Irina.
Access was not difficult. It's strange, but in Georgia, so at the beginning, when I was going to the hospitals, they were quite open because they were actually advertising. The first which I saw from Surrogacy was advertisement in the metro station. So they thought that, I think that they were thinking that I was doing some video which would be good for them, I don't know. But then with passing the time, of course, they realized that this is not what they were thinking, and the doors were closing quite quickly. So, but it's still in Georgia, it's possible with this private contact, for example, and Jana was a big help also, because when she was going to the doctor, she was saying that they are making a movie about me and you have to let them in. So she was like a guide and she was helping a lot. But yeah, we were not welcome in many hospitals, but yeah, the last one at C-section. So the doctor actually opened the door to film everything. Yeah, and it was, I don't know, Jana was always starting this conversation with her doctors, and then these private negotiations, yeah, and trust. Yeah.
Wow, thank you so much. And now to you, I think some of the questions, they are actually, you could both answer them, so maybe you can start with a few and then you can finish. Just to sum it up, I think there was a question on the right terminology. How do we call? Is it surrogate mother, gestational mother? Is it mother at all a correct term? Then the domino effect of legalization that we mentioned. Then this question as if the family in this construct of the traditional family is actually maybe the basis for this kind of outcome that we have discussed. Maybe this refers to genetical essentialism also. And the question about good guidelines that maybe could be parallel to adoption, and what else causes fragmentation of hubs other than the legal loopholes that you mentioned. That's a lot.
Yeah, I definitely can't do justice to that in 2 minutes, but I think it's important to start the dialogue, and I want to actually start off with the provocation that you've thrown, Irina, at us, which is so fantastic, because that's exactly what I start when I start talking to my undergraduate classes about this. And it's very different from talking to a group of feminists. And I start off by saying that use your sociological imagination and wear your C. Wright Mills cap and see what is the problem. First, start defining the problem, and then you can find the solution. And if you define the problem, in a way that we are doing right now. Of course, we'll try and find a technological fix. We are not getting to the root of the problem. So I don't think the infertility is not just social, it's actually political, as you said, and it doesn't happen by chance. That there's stratification, it's a very deliberate thing. So what can be fixed by technology in this? Actually nothing. So I'm glad you threw that into the pool for us to take back home on a Friday night. The part about, I want to jump to the really important question about, so then what is it that we can do as countries, as nations, to change the situation? And again, I think there's quite a bit that I have said in many different forums, but I want to bring back again after many years of trying to see how it works in different audiences, that surrogacy is such a difficult and complicated terrain that we cannot resolve it in silos, whether geographically, politically, or socially. We need to find connected ways of thinking about it. One of the things that I have constantly said that, yes, it is very exploitative, and we saw some stark instances of that in the documentary we watched. But at the same time, it should not take focus from the fact that in different parts of the global south, and I am just talking about the global south context right now, women choose to become surrogates out of a very limited set of choices that are made available to them in this very unequal capitalist world. They choose to become surrogates because that's the only chance that they dream could change their lives. And we saw that again, very starkly portrayed in the documentary. So instead of trying to think of banning it, what if we try to give this these kind of laborers the dignity that they are demanding? And that is where I come to your question about guidelines. I think when we start thinking about guidelines and laws, we can't think in binaries of altruism and commercial, because women get involved in surrogacy for reasons which somehow flow in the middle. They do want to become surrogates because they feel like they are giving birth to something that means something priceless for someone else. So there is inherent altruism involved in it, but at the same time, they really do want to be paid. And that's what we saw in the documentary as well. So to demand women to do it out of selflessness, as many countries have done. So many countries have banned surrogacy, but also many countries allow only altruistic surrogacy, and those countries also push out their intended parents to rest of the world because there are not enough women who want to do it for selfless reasons. And we know why. It's a very complicated job. You don't want to do it for free. So even when you're thinking about, even if a state really wants to think about it as altruistic, you still need to pay a lot of attention to a couple of things. One is the compensation. What is right compensation? What is enough compensation? What are the different aspects of the service that has been provided? It cannot end at the point of contract ending, because the bond with the baby continues beyond giving birth and giving it away. The bond and perhaps the trauma that was caused, as you saw in the documentary, perhaps continues beyond the contract. So you need to think about compensation, the time period of the compensation, the amount of compensation. Doesn't matter whether you call it altruistic surrogacy. You need to pay attention to the long-term and the short-term health. By health, I mean mental and physical. You need to pay attention to relationships forged by surrogacy. Some surrogates want to remain in touch with the baby. So what do we do with that fact? No one wants to remain in touch with the shirt that they produced in a factory, but this is a baby that you're making. You may want to stay in touch with them. So what is it that we're building into our discussions and contracts, which ensures that all sets of people involved, the child, the woman who gave birth, whether we call her substitute mother. The reason why I don't like calling surrogate mother is because it means substitute mother. I call it gestational mother because that's part of the motherhood gestation. But a lot of women I've spoken to actually who are surrogates prefer to call themselves surrogates and not mothers at all. So I think we need to have a discussion with the women giving birth as to what they would want to be called. So coming back to the relationship, we need to have that built into any kind of guideline, is that these women are not resources, they are not guinea pigs, they are living and human beings who need to be part of the negotiation table in any kind of international standards that we come up with, minimum standards we come up with, or international guidelines. They may not be the one like the Hague Convention on International Adoption. As I said, we've tried that, there will be no consensus on surrogacy, but at least this way, we can start coming up with a set of guidelines, registries, having the stamp of approval from your nation before you can even get into the international market, so that we can do away with the most exploitative part. We can continue this dialogue forever, but I do want to hand over the mic to...
because you both have one, I also didn't realize. Sure. Can you please close us off very briefly and then...
Okay, I'll try. Now I have a brain freeze because you said that I should do it fast. I guess I just want to make maybe a point and then come to yours, hopefully somehow. When I started doing research on Germany, I was actually not in academia, I was doing more like politics on this, and then I realized we don't actually know who owns fertility clinics in Germany and who makes money with them. And that was a shock to me, because when we hospitals, we can just see who owns them, who makes money, and we didn't know this with fertility clinics. And this sort of brought me into the question of, okay, who's making money, what's going on? And then I did interviews with people receiving eggs from third parties from Spain. And now I'm coming back to your question. And I realized that for them, the family is a very big part, but there's also a lot that goes wrong before they find themselves in this very unhappy situation. So I feel like through these interviews I've learned, on the one hand, yes, I think we need to think of family formations beyond the nuclear family, where your children of your own are so fundamental to your happiness, and we need to create visions that allow people to deal with the grief of maybe not being able to have a child and still find fulfilling, happy lives afterwards. So I agree that we need to channel energy into providing better guidelines, etc. But I think we also need to channel energy into providing different ideas of what happy lives can look like and help people to deal with that grief, that maybe a child might not be part of that life. But then also the other part is that it's the tip of the iceberg when people turn to technologies, usually. I mean, it's always different stories, but usually it's the tip of the iceberg. Like, a lot of things have gone wrong beforehand. One is, a lot of the people in the interview said they didn't have good health care for a while and then found themselves to be biologically infertile. Endometriosis is a very good example. Or, as I said before, they weren't able to afford the flat that could have allowed them to have children in their 20s. They were only able to have this flat in their 40s, and then sort of needed assisted technologies. So, trying to close, I think channeling our energy into multiple arenas, both protecting gestational mothers where they exist, but also allowing for sort of other reproductive futures or non-reproductive futures for those on the demand side.
Amazing last words, thank you. I want to thank all of you for this discussion. I want to thank all of you for your questions, but also for being here. We will still have the chance maybe to chat afterwards. And I just want to say that, of course, Gunda Werner Institute and the Global Unit for Feminism and Gender Democracy at Heinrich-Böll Foundation, we will be one of the spaces where these conversations will continue, and we will also try to push for more feminist debate on this issue, because if we don't engage with this topic from a feminist perspective, I think the right-wing actors are already on this topic, either because they want to push neo-fascist ideas of how the right baby looks like, or who should have them or not, or fundamentalists will just ban it because of religious reasons. So of course we need to step up our game and engage in these conversations, and we will do that also tomorrow and in the following year, of course, so stay tuned. Please join us also tomorrow from 11 here, and thank you so much for your insights and for being here.